Comics Plus, what's going on? Akasan here.
DC song, what's up, peoples?
It's the weekend, a weekday actually. We're finally, hey, Venom, when the hell is that? When is it coming out? I don't know, but hey, wait, are we really getting Doom in October? No. October?
Yeah, it's October 15th.
No way. All right, hey, we win, everybody. Oh, and that one's on HBO Max anyways. Hey, we're about to see this movie right here, Shang-Chi. Let's go.
IMAX へこれより最新テクノロジーを駆使した世界最高の映像体験をお届けします。座席に座ったままあなたをリアリティの極限へと誘う澄み切ったクリアな映像。
So a Loki pillow and all the Disney Plus stuff. That's actually a pretty cool shirt though. I wouldn't pay that much for it. But oh, because it's kind of.
You gotta get wrong with it.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Anyone? Shang-Chi here? That'd be kind of cool actually. It's alright. Not bad. For the usual merchandise they have. Overhaul. Okay. Alright, so here we are guys, back in the studio here, about to give you the review of Shang-Chi. First and foremost, what did you think?
I loved it.
Of course you did.
I loved it. It had, like I mentioned, everything I wanted. I wanted some good kung fu, interesting character, backdrop, stuff like that, and dragons. Oh.
Dragons!
Oh.
Spoiler for those that need to know. Yeah, so...
it's on the poster.
I mean, at this point, yeah. With this review being out at the time it is, this is going to be a spoiler type of talk a bit, because I don't really think,
bad,
you know, honestly, you guys have already heard everything you want to hear from different reviewers for a spoiler-free review, I suppose. So, yeah, go see the movie, check it out when you can. In some sense, though, there's part of me that was kind of thinking that I could, and I know people are going to hate me for saying this, but part of me was thinking I could have waited for it to show up on Disney Plus. But that's also just, I think that could have been any movie. Right. Any movie in general, because it's been almost 2 years now since I've gotten a chance to go out and see a movie on the big screen.
And just enjoy it.
Yeah, and, you know, as I've already mentioned before, the way you see a movie in Japan, you got to wear a hot-ass mask. It's hot as... in there, I was sweating the entire time.
Depending on the theater, they'll either have no AC on whatsoever, and it's just hot, or the complete opposite, where it's super cold. Yeah. Which I don't mind, but I need to know before going in with just a t-shirt. And I'm like, I need to bring it.
Yeah.
Because it really does get that cold.
And
not as cold as Hawaii.
Right.
The theaters in Hawaii, that's freezing.
And I would actually prefer it be super cold instead of because once it gets hot, there's not much more you can do. I can't take anything else off.
Can't take anything else off, and you're sweating, so by the time you leave, you're uncomfortable also.
But getting back and point to the movie, you know, for me personally, and it's no coincidence, it's not just coincidence that I'm playing a background music for Legend of Korra. I am so glad that I actually had the honor of watching the Avatar series and the Legend of Korra series, because I think in some sense that's really what prepared me. And on top of that, ironically, Raya, Legend of the Last Dragon, Raya, story...
and the Last Dragon.
Right, with, you know, Aquafina actually ended up playing
the water dragon
Elsa looking type of girl. So I knew her voice was really noticeable, and in some ways that somewhat prepared me for the story of Shang-Chi that we saw, in them going to a different little area, them dealing with outlanders or outsiders type of situation. Right. It was kind of cool to see that, and you know, for that I really enjoyed it. And IMAX, I thought it worked really well. There was a few plot situations that were a little cliche-ish, but
yeah, you know. there were some things that's in the movie that's a little cliche-ish, and I think part of it was on purpose.
Yeah.
So people have some type of familiarity with it. Some of the locations that they shot in, real world locations, they shot, you know, there's a heavy population or Asian community within certain areas, so it's like, okay,
very true, very true.
I get that to make it feel familiar, and so people are like, oh, that's like my neighborhood, or I know this person kind of thing. That's fine. But there are some formulaic things that happen in the movie that I know bother some people. For the first time in a long time, it actually didn't bother me so much. And I think it's also because we were talking about before, because it's more of a Avengers orientation. That's what we call the origin stories. Avengers orientation movies.
Very similar to what I felt, because we had a whole discussion about this in the car, which in some sense I kind of wish I set up my camera and but we couldn't be going home driving in silence, so we want to talk about it.
But next time, if I'm driving, you can film it and we'll talk like that too. Keep it organic.
We'll see. But one of the things we were kind of talking about, is this Avengers orientation thing, and I felt kind of the similar way. My biggest issue with some of the Marvel movies sometimes is, and I'm glad they're not doing it in this particular phase, is Marvel hasn't essentially announced its entire slate for like 2 to 3 years, and we don't really know,
hopefully,
no pun intended, the end game. When they announced the fact that they were doing Civil War, Infinity War, Part 1 and 2 at the time, that's what it was called. We hadn't even got into Doctor Strange yet, and when Doctor Strange, when the trailer came out, people, always remember I said this, is like, I kind of just want to skip this origin of Doctor Strange so we can go right into Civil War, because I know that's coming up. With Shang-Chi, it's a whole different thing where it's an origin story, yes, and sometimes part of me is like, okay, can we just kind of
speed it up
so we can get to this final point? But I know other people really appreciate that sort of thing. It may not necessarily be for me, but I think it works in the general Marvel, in
the general sense of marketing and branching out to potential new fans and things.
Correct. Marvel by the numbers, essentially.
What I like about it is that it does feel like a standalone.
Okay, yeah.
With hints of connection to something bigger or longer in storytelling.
Okay.
Without it being too heavy.
Exactly. And that's, I think, actually, when you hit the nail right there, is the fact that one of the good things about this movie is that there aren't really a lot of Easter eggs unless you're really hunting for them.
Unless you're a hardcore fan of the comic book, you're not going to notice a lot of the nods to certain things.
And it doesn't detract from the film as well. That's the big thing. Unless you've watched
all the MCU movies.
Right. It really doesn't detract from the film, because that'll happen with a lot of other movies. Like for me personally with Ant-Man, I've never really liked the Ant-Man movies, but the highest points of the Ant-Man movies for me is when, they had an Avengers cameo or something. So I felt like Shang-Chi didn't need that, and that's what was kind of cool about that.
No, it didn't, and I'm glad that we didn't have to suffer that, because there's the unfortunate thing of when you do use established, in this case we'll say Avengers, that do cameos and other properties, sometimes it feels like a shoo-in. Right. And they're like, we're not sure how the movie's going to do, so we're just going to put you over here so we can actually get the numbers back up, just as a cushion.
Definitely.
That, and like when it comes to since you mentioned Ant-Man, when it comes to the Ant-Man character, a lot of people look at that character as, in the comic books, he's had a really bad past. He's been an abusive person and all this kind of stuff. So not a lot of people that are fans of the comic book are like, oh, I want to see him in the movies. They're kind of like, do I want to see that?
That's a good point.
But MCU did a fantastic job of not going down that road and doing something different. And that's something that I think I appreciate when it comes to the movies.
In this particular movie, who stood out for you the most?
Ooh. Who stood out for me?
Personally, for me, I think Shang's daughter. Sister. She was kind of the breakout. She was the breakout role for me. She's what made the movie actually interesting, because as much I think Shang-Chi, the character played exactly the person he was kind of supposed to be, a little goofy, a little everyday man type of thing, and it was fine. He wasn't supposed to be kind of the hero, so to speak, but I think his sister took that role that I was kind of looking for, and again, the Avatar kind of reference is like, that's Zula right there. That's totally Zula right there.
I could see that.
Zuko is the kind of bastardized son, cast away, he left on his own accord. But the sister essentially is like, look, I'm not just gonna become the what was the Lord Mark Hamill played him, the
Fire Lord.
Fire Lord. I'm not just going to be serving the Fire Lord. I'm going to become the Fire Lord. And that's exactly what we saw at the end of the movie. And I mean, for me, that was, the writing was on the wall. The moment Chung was like, oh yeah, he's cleaning, she's helping demolish.
Clean out.
Right. I'm like, yeah, but you think?
Nah,
yeah, I don't think so.
Because there's the line that she gave early in the movie. Are we doing spoiler or spoiler?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're already
line that she gives in the movie where it's like, my father already had an empire, so why not build my own?
Yeah.
And now that there's that power vacuum of him not being there, it's like, well, why wouldn't
that
she
was
take
so
it?
obvious. Yeah,
now, of course, she can go in any direction with it, but it's like, well, why not just take over?
Right.
I mean, now you have endless resources. I mean, he's over 1,000 years old. You got nothing but Kish. So it's like the only human being that could actually compare, or kingdom that could compare to that, would be Wakanda.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to the resources and stuff, you got a lot. There's a lot you could do with it. For me, I actually liked both of them. I liked both of them because they felt like an avatar for one specific character broken into two parts.
Okay.
His dynamic with Awkwafina was fine, but that's what felt formulaic to me. So it's like, okay, it is what it is.
Fair enough.
But I liked him and his sister.
Fair enough, but I did like, I think Awkwafina had some pretty good one-liners sometimes that, some of them hit really good, especially the whole thing about Asians, which, I think a good amount of people don't even realize that a lot of Asians will have two names, and you'll have the
birth name, and if they move to another country, then maybe you change your name to whatever the language of that country is.
And then not even that, even if you're a national, if you're born in America, your parents will still give you, for example, a traditional Japanese name or a traditional
Chinese or Korean name.
Whatever. And then for the rest of the public, just so it makes it easier, you get a Western name like that. Almost all of my Asian friends, literally all of them do. And it's always this sort of like problem, like when we're in America, they really actually hate being called by their traditional Asian name. So it was kind of interesting to kind of see the way this was converting into the movie. And I actually thought that was a pretty cool one-liner, little joke there that made it well done. What I didn't like, one of the things that bothered me actually, that kind of turned me off of the movie, was I loved the fact of how they handled the Mandarin.
I was like, ooh.
That
would be an interesting movie.
The way they fixed the way they fixed the Mandarin, and in just the way
it was delivered,
they delivered it in a dinner conversation, I thought was so good.
That was genius writing.
I thought that was great that they're like, look, the entire world was crippled by an orange duck.
Yeah, that and the other thing is like the way. Not just the way he described it, but when you look at what's going on at the time, he gave up being the head of the Ten Rings to have a family. So no one's there, no one knows, and it's like, well, I've got something more important.
And then if you watch the actual spin-off, All Hail to the King, which is available on Disney Plus, I highly recommend you guys watch it. Right. You can actually, the timeline...
Now I'll watch it.
Oh, okay.
I was afraid to watch it because I was afraid it might spoil something for me, so I didn't touch it at all.
Well, this was
now that I've seen the movie.
But actually, interesting enough, this was like 5 years ago they did this spinoff. Yeah.
That long?
It was a long time ago, and so there was already hints of the real Mandarin is coming back.
But see, that right there would spoil it for me.
Well,
in a joking way, it's
something like that.
So there's someone else,
right? But
so it's 3 people.
But that was kind of Marvel's way of fixing Iron Man 3 a little bit, because many people were like, including myself,
Iron Man 3?
So my the one problem I had with this particular movie that kind of pulled me out of the movie was actually bringing Trevor back. Really? I really didn't like it.
I didn't mind them bringing him back. I'll say that there's a scene where it's like the line he delivered was fine, but his action afterwards didn't match, and that's during the battle where he's playing dead, and then I forget the name of the character or the being that comes up to him checking on him, and he's like, hey, I'm just playing dead. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Okay, now do what I do, and the character turns over and plays dead, and then he for whatever reason he decides to sit up, and then he's looking at him. That threw me out of the scene. Had he just kept his head down, it was like perfect.
I mean, I think in general his entire inclusion to me was just as ridiculous as in some ways was as ridiculous as the white dude that was in Black Panther who was part of
the agent.
Yeah, the agent.
As
right?
they said, so he was like the token white guy.
Right, exactly. So I was like, did Ben Kingsley really need to come play the token white guy in this movie?
I didn't mind him being there, but him going to the end.
Right.
For me, I was like, okay, instead of him being there, he's in the village.
Right.
Would have made like one or the other. I didn't need both.
He could have been an English teacher.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they kind of included him as like a performance artist or whatever.
Well, that and it's like we need someone to be comic relief and deliver
because
this exposition of why you have to go to this village and when you could go to beat your dad there.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, unnecessary. I understand it, but a little unnecessary. Yeah. I like Ben Kingsley.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
He wasn't. He wasn't necessary for that part of the movie.
Not
but
at all.
Using a map again wouldn't have worked because that would have been the third time.
Fair enough. I mean,
So I kind of get it.
I mean, my thing is a little rodent. I don't know.
Yeah, the character.
The rodent could have been coming out and like.
They basically had Gizmo there.
Yeah.
Because I'm listening to him like,
Gizmo,
did they use
Groot.
the same sound bites from Gizmo in this?
Gizmo, Groot, Drogo, or no, not Drogo, Grogu, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was all right. What I did like a lot, one of my favorite parts of the movie was actually
dragons. Sorry,
Michelle. Well,
Michelle
actually, speaking of which, the fact that a third act didn't deal with like a giant thing about to explode or whatever, and we had two dragons fighting each other, I thought that was kind of cool. Actually,
but they did have a disposable army. That the formulaic part, they had a formulaic. Part of the movie, and it's fine because it works. Yeah. So okay. Sometimes it's annoying and irritating, but it's also easy to get over because at least I know for the origin story it's going to be like this.
Fair enough.
Now let's move on.
Fair enough. But with Michelle Yeoh, right?
Michelle
Yeoh. Seeing her on screen again.
Yeah.
I didn't even know she was going to be in the movie. I figured there might be some inclusion, but by the time she showed up in the movie, I'm like, oh right, that's right. Yeah. And she did her whole airbending fight thing. I thought that was that was my favorite scene of the whole movie.
One of the things I loved about the movie is when they're doing their forms and things, they're basically using two specific, given it's a mix, but the two base are Hungar and Tai Chi. Hungar is actually very hard form, and it's very aggressive, where Tai Chi is actually a lot softer. It's not to be played with, though. It's very deadly. But using that as the two aspects of his mother and his father, and let that being the representations of him as well, I thought were handled really, really well.
Yes.
I'm glad that Michelle Yeoh was not playing some strange version of his wife. I'm glad they did not do that. Movies do that, and I'm like, no.
Fair enough.
Playing her sister, I was like, wow, that's cool. But it's also painful because he doesn't have his mom there, but he has a connection to his mom.
Correct.
Or him and his sister do. So I like that it was soft and it wasn't beaten over the head.
There we go. So I could definitely see a mix between Zuko and Uncle Iroh being around there. Yeah. But Zuko, but more...
Uncle Iroh was the dude with the arrows.
Right.
That man, I gotta check. I want to say he's The Last Samurai.
Yeah. Okay. But Zuko, but more importantly, even Todoroki in My Hero Academia, with the whole idea of struggling with two powers, essentially like that.
Well, that's actually really good. Yeah. That works out perfectly.
Yeah.
Because the beginning of the movie would be Aang.
Correct.
But towards the middle and the end would be Todoroki and Zuko.
So I like we were kind of talking about how sometimes there was a little copy and paste, and there was a lot of influence from Avatar and Legend of Korra.
Like when the rings start going around him, like all the four elements. It's like,
yeah. But
it's still a badass scene.
But I think it made, and then the final, one of the final showdowns with his father was essentially like, I took away your bending type of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
I just took away all your bending, all your power, but it worked.
It worked.
It worked.
I get why people are like, well, Avatar is so cool because it has all these inspirations and influence from different Asian cultures. That's fantastic. The downside to it is when you have films like this, that are heavily based in an Asian culture, when they do things, it does feel like, oh, well, I've kind of seen this before.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
But now, if you haven't seen Avatar, this will be completely fresh and mind-blowing for you. And if you have seen Avatar, this will be completely repetitive and mind-blowing for you.
And then,
because I loved it.
And then at the end of the day, Shang-Chi is still a better Avatar movie than the Avatar movies.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, not joking. Yeah. You could take like 2 scenes out of this movie, and it would be better than the entire Avatar movie altogether. The only other thing I'll say is there were a lot of rocks around when Shang-Chi's father was fighting. Every time my boy used the rings, there's like there's you hear crumbling somewhere.
True. That is true. He was kind of
in a restaurant outside. It don't matter. It's like rocks.
So he essentially was an earthbender. But we're gonna stop the comparisons here about Avatar, and I want to wrap this up by talking about the post-credit scenes. I mean, we already. The sister taking over, that's a whole nother, that we've already kind of explained that, but there's something that was picked up a lot that DC Sun, you had a theory on.
And working with Sharon Carter.
Right, so we see Shang and Awkwafina and then Wong getting recruited.
The coming
and
about
you
the rings.
see what to be the new Avengers Council, essentially. But we see Brie Larson, Mark Ruffalo there, and they're talking about the rings and things like that. One particular thing that DC pointed out that it didn't even register with me is the fact that, we see Mark Ruffalo in a sling.
And he's as Bruce Banner.
But he's as Bruce Banner, and he's not necessarily as the Hulk. Last time we met them, the Hulk and Banner essentially
fused together, and they were smarter and stronger.
Professor Hulk.
And had a balance. So why is it that he is back to being Banner?
Correct.
Something
so that's
wrong.
a theory. That's one problem.
And part of that, dealing with the theory, is every time someone puts on the gauntlet or the rings and they snap, they see either a future or a past. My theory is that he saw something of a future that he didn't like, whether it be direct, meaning himself becoming, I don't know, bad in some form or fashion, or he saw an alternate version of himself and or a future that ultimately he felt like he's responsible for. So he's trying to reset it and try and find a way around it by not using Hulk, regressing.
Then we saw Captain Marvel looking like she just got pile drive by Rhodey in the morning. She had that bed head.
Just like
I was like, yo, what you doing? Why did you have to leave so soon? Like, okay, Rhodey calling. And then finally, what do you think? What do you think the rings?
She's like, I need some War Machine.
She's like, sorry, I gotta go.
I get him. You can get my number from him. And
I don't have
her number. And that's one of those things. Like, does anyone?
Look, Captain Marvel. Look, she's running up there, and you see Rhodey wearing nothing but the top part of the helmet. Boom! You looking for this?
Like he dropped the tank.
He literally probably did drop the tank on Captain Marvel. That's what it would take to have her walking away like that with that crazy wig.
The hair was bad.
I don't know. But finally, what do you think the 10 rings are?
Okay, so
the beacon.
The beacon, I think, is either the signal to, like you mentioned, potentially the Eternals. Because of the color and the way it looks.
Okay.
But I think it's a lot older, so I think, if anything, the Celestials. The reason I don't say Galactus, because I feel like it's too soon. Now, what would be really, really weird is if it's actually to a version of Kang the Conqueror.
Okay.
Because he's in the multiverse. And they make several comments about it not being part of this universe. In which I have issues with, because it's like, if you're guarding the Dark Gate for over 1,000 years, how come you don't have a mode of transportation from the village to the gate?
And not to mention the fact that even when Shang, one scene when he was doing the, fusing all of them together, they started spinning very similar to the way in Loki TV series. The time.
So, not just time, because everything looks the same.
The multiverse.
The multiverse, the timelines,
the
Strange's magic, the constructs, everything looks the same. So that's why I was like, I think magic and all this stuff actually comes from a source in space via Celestials.
I'm sure the new rock stars are already on it now.
They've definitely done like 16 videos already. And I think that's also because of the similarities in aesthetics and by Thor's comment. Thor makes a comment a long time ago where, here on Earth we're looking at magic and science being different, where for him they're one and the same. And if they're one and the same for him, that means they're one and the same much further and much older than him.
There you go. Well, let's wrap it up, guys. Red Nation, stand up, speak up. Let me know what you guys think about this particular movie. Did you are you feeling it? Where are you ranking it on your Marvel
Top
scale
3.
and such? Really? That high for you?
I grew up on Kung Fu.
Okay.
I love it. And to have a superhero movie with martial arts in it, and yes, dragons, but putting those things together and doing a good job of it, because we won't talk about Iron.
It's all good.
Then I'm happy. I'm super happy that they did this.
Great
and I think
work,
casting-wise, it worked out really well.
Really good work.
I can't wait to the sequel, and if you don't have it planned, you need to plan it. And you can cast us as the characters on the train since you already did something.
I'm gonna be the next reactor. Like, Marvel has definitely taken.
The dude was on the bus. Yeah, that's right. Because I didn't think about it. That's the dude that's in Spider-Man.
He's
like, hey man, can you do backflips? He's like, yeah.
He's like,
I was like, that's it.
That's
all he did, and he's in the next movie.
I'm like, look, man. Like, hey, man, do
right.
Look, I took a little bit of kung fu training myself.
Yeah,
so
that's the only thing
I loved it. No, I loved it. I loved
that's
it.
funny because we see that all the time.
I love the reaction. I love the reactors being included in the MCU. I can't wait to be in the next flick. Feige, make it happen.
Make it happen.
We're out of here, guys. Peace.